everybody. My name is Scott Callahan, and I'm from the ACAT fleet, and we're going to have How to Sail the Lake this afternoon. And our three speakers are going to be Lloyd Kitchen, Tom Riss, and Mike Gruber. And before we get started, I'd just like to say a couple of things, basic things. If you're not from Lake Apacon, if you haven't been here before, the lake is basically about 10 miles long and about a mile wide, and it has some 48 miles of coastline. And at this point, I'd just like to introduce Lloyd Kitchen, who sailed here his whole life. Lloyd?
Thank you, Scott. We're going to chase me around that thing, so I can't eat my sandwich when I'm talking here. How to sail a lake. It can't be done. How's that? What I'm going to do is just a brief overview of things I've observed over the years on how to defend the fleet with certain wind directions, where you might want to start, what to look for, and my disclaimer is going to be whatever I say tomorrow, the opposite will probably be true. So today, at the moment, it's west wind, maybe a little bit southwest, and typically on a southwest wind, it's not quite right there. Excuse me? Can you hear? Okay. Oh, there we go. I'll do west, southwest, northwest for now. On a southwest wind, we would typically be starting down the lake in Great Cove down there. Some things to consider though, it doesn't stay southwest 100% of the time. You know, a little bit more south, a little bit more west makes a difference on how you want to set yourself up relative to the fleet. If it's got more south in it, your starting line is going to be here by number 8. You probably, typically, I like to start down towards the pin, heading to leeward of the group, and defend the left side of the group as we work down this part of the shoreline here. The wind's coming this way. Sometimes it'll wraps around the island both directions. So as you work your way down the fleet, when you start to get down to this, 2/3 of the way down the lake, you start to get a little stuff curling around this side of the island here, and will frequently come across in Port Lift. If you get yourself going too close to the west shore early in the game, you're going to be up there and shiftier stuff and lighter stuff. That's southwest with a lot of south in it. Southwest wind, where it tends to be a little bit more from the west. Different set of circumstances. Again, you're probably starting up here at number 8. I would then be more inclined to start in the middle of the group, but try to, because you're going to get west shots out of the sticks here frequently. So you always want to take a look over your shoulder. You're coming down on starboard tack, you always want to look at that group above you, because frequently the guys up higher will be getting more of the lift the wind coming out of the sticks. Having said that, you still have this shoreline here to deal with. If you get yourself up too high, too early, you can leave yourself in a flat spot for longer than you care to be. As it is with any place, you don't want to be out on the sides. You want to be in the middle. You want to favor maybe one side or the other a little bit, but you want to be close to the middle. It gives you more options. West wind. Well, which is, I'm not sure we have here right now. More west. You all set?
Find it. That's it. Oh, that's it?
Okay, we're good. West wind, one of the nastiest ones on the lake because it's very shifty. We start in a couple of places here. We might start out in Lee's Cove here, beating up into River Styx there, or more typically we'd start at number 8 or number 9 here. Where am I here? Number 8, number 9. And beat up into number 11 up into Byron Bay. It's shifty. There is no hard and fast rule. Try to play the middle and look over your shoulder regularly. I would say though that on a west or even a little northwest wind, that playing the left side of the group. If we have a northwest wind, we'll say we're beating up this way, or even more west, we're beating up this way. more often than not, I try to get a little to the left of the group. Not all the way up in the corner, in the dead spot, but those that are to the left typically get a little bit more lift than the guys that are stuck down up against the shoreline there, sailing off into oblivion. Where do you start? Again, I'm more prone on, if there's more west component to it, I'll start down towards the pin. If it's a lot of oscillations, I just start in the middle and see how it sets up. Like anything else, you got to look around. You can't. There is no hard and fast rule. Again, I'll tell you this tonight, and then tomorrow the exact opposite will occur. East winds. And now we talked about starting going upwind. Going downwind, we've already had the beat as your experience. You know where the wind had been coming from. Keep your crew should be looking behind to tell you how to set up, but generally speaking, you want to sail the headers going downwind, so act accordingly. The favorite side going upwind, you're going to be in the opposite jibe going down. Use your knowledge from the beat to decide where you're going to go on the run. East wind. It's nice in that the shifts are typically much longer and slower, but it may be the worst. Breeze on the lake because the lakes are shorter. If you're going, this is a pretty good length up in here from 11 down to 8, or 11 to 9, 11 to 8. But occasionally we'll have something at the southeast, and we're running way down here. You don't want to be up against where, Brian. You typically don't want to get yourself up against the west shore here as you're beating. The boats that are further east tend to get a little bit more lift on the beats on an east and on a southeast wind. Again, the best. I'm a defensive sailor. Some guys will hang it out and try to be aggressive. I'm one that tries to minimize my mistakes and try to stay more or less in the middle of the course. You can't do that all the time, obviously, but I would say that on an east wind, you're going to get shots out of the coves here, and it just tends to lift you up more. The guy that's down here is going to be the last guy to get it, for one thing, and they typically do not get as much of it. And in the light air, it tends to hit the shoreline here and lift up over you. So if you're up against shore, you have less wind than the guys that are out more in the middle of the lake. On a run, coming down the lake on an east wind, run or a reach, coming down here, again, you've got shots coming out of these coves, and in light air, yeah, you want to go low early and try to come up in the lulls, but you need to defend the guy up high. Like I say, Brian, case in point, last year, winning the race pretty big, and ran low like you typically would in a dying breeze, so you can come up harder later on. But frequently the puffs will come out of the coves here, so the guys that stayed high get them first, and they run right down over the top of you. You don't want to get up under shorelines over here where we're going up and down. It drives me crazy. That's where I have the biggest decision to make. Do I go up with those guys? Because you know there's a big flat spot up there around Chestnut Point. So you gamble and go in there? I never do, but I would say at least half the time I get burned by the guy that wants to take the chance. And I'll get as close as I have the nerve to do, but it's a gamble. I try to play the odds more, and I try not to get up under there, but I've probably lost as much as I've won up under the shore. Anybody else? Want to move? Here's that.
I'm going to introduce Tom Wiss. Tom?
Thank you, Scott. I've been sailing Lake Pakong, racing for 52 years, and I'm still confused. But I thought I was a pretty good sailor for 30 years. About 20 years ago, I got back into sailing after a 10-year hiatus, and I was humbled because I found out I stink. So I started studying, and the first book I got was by Dr. Stuart Walker. And it's a great book on racing, but it's really a great book on wind and understanding the wind, what the wind does, and where it comes from, and why it does the things it does, why shifts happen. And I recommend that if you are serious about sailing, you have to understand the wind. You should read that book. It's called Advanced Racing Tactics. One of the first things I learned about when I got back into sailing, one of the first things I learned was the topography of the lake really dictates wind direction in certain locations. What I do every day that I go racing, first thing in the morning, is check the weather forecast. And I check the hourly forecast to see what the wind's going to do, the velocity, but more than that, the direction. And I check it hour upon hour and see which way it's going to shift on the predictions. And because I want to know that during a race, if it's northwest, if it's going to go north, you need to know that, because the windward leg you sailed up in, the wind will change possibly by the leeward leg. So what you sailed in the first leg up may be different than the second leg down, and it can shift a lot. Because of the topography of the lake, the west shore has steeper, higher mountains than the east shore. So when the wind is coming from the west or northwest or southwest, you're going to get bigger swirling action around points of land. And the wind will travel across the lake, and a lot of times when it's puffy in the spring, not today, but a lot of times when it's puffy in the spring, you'll see big black patches of water coming down on the lake. They're coming over the hills or coming around the hills, and they're just dropping right down on the lake. You have to be very careful about how you sail into those. You have to be on the right side of those. As the wind comes down on the water, it spreads out in all directions. It doesn't go in a straight line. So you can have a boat 5 boat lengths in front of you sailing 20 degrees higher than you in the same shift and the same velocity. And you need to understand where that wind is coming down on the lake and where you are relative to that. Lloyd talked a lot about where to sail in specific directions, specific wind directions. There's a lot of points of land that I look for, and when I was getting pretty serious about sailing, Alex Schmigelski, real good sailor, good club member for a long time, gave a seminar, and his seminar was really all about percentages. And he took every wind direction and every point of land and basically explained to us what these points of land do and what the risk and reward is for sailing into them or getting close to them. And typically, in a northwest wind direction, when the wind is coming in this direction, you've got 2 major points of land. You've got Halsey Island and the point over here, and then you've got Raccoon Island.
Change the direction for you.
Doesn't really matter. So if we're sailing this course from 9 to 11, I look for these 2 points of land specifically. And I try to get port tack right to Halsey Island, right on this point. Because the wind channels around Halsey. It becomes stronger here. As you're sailing into it, you're going to get lifted, and you can get lifted 15 degrees coming in. On the way out, as you tack back, you're going to probably get lifted 15 degrees coming back out with stronger breeze. That normally brings you right over to this point of land, which does exactly the same thing, because it channels around this way. You get stronger wind on that point, and going in you get lifted, coming out you get lifted. The problem is that it's like sailing a ley line to the mark. If you're short by a couple of boat lengths, you can get hammered. You have to be on your ley line to the point of land that you're looking for. Once you get past these 2 points, it gets real fluky up in here. The wind channels around Halsey, and it channels through Byron Bay. And depending where you are up here, you can get really hurt right in here,
but you can really make out good on the point of track wind. Same thing over on the other side. You can get hurt right in here, but you very often get a real good breeze coming out of Byron. And you have to be committed, in my opinion, you have to be committed to one side or the other, unless you're in the lead, and then you really have to lead the boats to the mark. You have to cover. A lot of times with a start here in this wind direction, you get the same type of channeling right here at the windlass. It can be a little hard to get in here. It can be very hard to get out, because when you can come out, you get a big lift and then you get a big header. And it's very difficult to actually make your way across the lake. It is for me anyway. I want to tack back to port right away, and I want to sail up here, and then I'm never on my line to Halsey Island. I'm always underneath it. It's hard to keep back out in the lake, but it can really pay if you're diligent about it. You really have to watch what you're doing, and in my opinion, this area is the hardest area in the lake to sail. There's two pretty big mountains. One right up in here, this one's pretty big, and this one's actually pretty big here. And as the winds come over these hills and drop down on the lake, you have to be very diligent about where you are relative to the puff. If the wind's from the other direction, from northeast, I'm sorry, it's really the best direction on the lake to sail. And Lloyd had talked about one side or the other. I almost always like to, I'm sorry, if the wind direction is from the southwest. So, southwest? That's okay. Doesn't matter. So if it's southwest, the club is where, down here? Yeah, okay. So we're sailing from 8 to the club. I always look for Chestnut Point, and I always look for Sharp's Rock. And the wind will channel around Sharp's Rock quite dramatically, and I pick out Sharp's Rock and actually Craig Bradley's boathouse. I try to be coming in between Craig Bradley's and Sharp's Rock, and typically you get a real nice lift coming in here, bringing you right up to Sharp's Rock. And then as you come back out, you get another lift and a velocity increase. And then you have to make your way to the mark, depending where they tuck the mark in. If they tucked it in deep over there, it can be real hard to get back out. If they brought it over this way more, it's actually a lot easier. A lot of times people will actually sail down more in front of the club, and you get a good velocity shift as the wind comes around the Merchant's Island here. But you have to be careful about the breeze that, well, it used to channel through where the condos are. It doesn't channel through as much anymore, but it gets real shifty. But a lot of times you feel like you're getting a good velocity increase over there, but then you have to cross in front of the club and it can die on you. It's very, very tricky, in my opinion, to cross in front of the club. I'd rather be out in the lake. A couple of the other observations, a couple of the other things that I do is I'm always one of the first boats out in the morning, and the reason I do that is to observe winds on the lake. Not so much to go sail in those winds, but I like to observe the lake and what the winds are doing. I do that by looking at other sailboats. I do that by looking at flags, and a lot of people like to eye up the starting line, so to speak, before the race, and it's always a good idea to do that. I really like to see other people do that. I think you get a broader picture. It's real nice to practice start 10 minutes before the start on starboard at the windward end and on port at the leeward end and see what it looks like. But I'd rather look at somebody else doing that. I get a broader picture doing that. And I'll do a couple little practice starts here and there, but I don't push it real hard. I don't want to give away a position. I don't want to let anybody else know what I'm planning. So I try not to let anybody else know what I'm planning on doing. One of the other things that, it seems really basic, but I see people doing this all the time. They're not at the start. You know, at 2 minutes to go, they're 500 yards up the lake, and they're not thinking about the start. At the 5-minute gun, you should be at the starting line. And I don't think you should ever be more than 10 or 15 boat lengths away from the starting line after the 5-minute gun. And you always need to be there, especially on Lake Apacon. On Lake Apacon, things change so fast. You might think that starboard at the committee boat is going to be a great start, and with 30 seconds to go, the port end's favored on port. You just need to be able to make that adjustment quickly. One of the disadvantages that E-Scouts have is that we start first, so we don't get the advantage of watching another fleet or 2 other fleets or 3 other fleets start and know what the first weather leg is going to bring. So, in my opinion, for the E-Scout fleet, the start is really 50% of the race, and I need to make those adjustments pretty quickly. We talk a lot on the boat about what we're going to do, and I think most of my crew has figured out that we don't know what we're going to do until the gun goes off. So, thank you.
Next up, we have Michael Gruber. Michael.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that all these nice graphics are all done by Dean Lennox, and Dean was going to help us out today also, probably between Dean and Tom and Lloyd, probably the gurus and professors of sailing Lake Apacon. I've been sailing the lake for probably over 40 years, and I sail an A-class catamaran, a little different than the Thistles and E-Scouts and Stars, but I'll give you some of my insights. On these graphics, Dean has brought out, okay, you'll see the shadowing effect, okay, and these are areas to avoid on the lake, okay. You'll see over here on the west shore, Tom brought some great ideas. You know, the mountains are so high on that west shore that you're going to have tunneling winds, okay. So when the wind's from the coming in from the west or the southwest or the northwest, you've got to be careful of certain areas. And as Tom mentioned, you come around Burton's Island and you come down low in here, you can get stuck and never get out of it. So when we had a southwesterly breeze, I try to number one, and another point Tom said, I try to watch the E-Scout start, okay? And for the other fleets, that's an important thing, because you'll see them going, you see the direction, and then all of a sudden you'll see people dying and people getting lifted. And I watch that very carefully. I know a lot of the ACAT sailors who start second, you know, are just tinkering down the line, looking at their boats, looking at their gear, but I'm studying where they are. We've got 5 minutes to watch them come up the course and go up the course, and I'll watch them and I'll see what kind of lifts they get, and I'll position myself to be in that area. In green, we have depicted, as Tom said also, areas that we like to rise up and get lifts out of, okay? And when you're starting from down here by the yacht club and you're going up towards the Jefferson House, okay, we try to hug this shore and get that lift coming through here. Okay, I try to stay away from the easterly end of the lake because you never know what's going to happen, especially coming over here. And then I kind of try to hug around here. You get a nice lift going over here by Chestnut Point. So I never come over into River Styx. There's always a hollow in here, and I try to keep basically in the middle of the lake. Okay, I don't try to shift directions at all. Okay, you notice there's the big blanket over here. If you try to sail up in here, there's just a hole in this lake that you'll never get through. So I either stay to the west or the east of it, but I never stay in this area right in here, because it's the ever-moving hole that never goes away. Tactics, when you're having big regattas, guys from the other lake sail right up here, and you'll see boats scurrying past them from here, you'll see boats scurrying past them from here, and they'll just die in this middle. So I always stay towards the shore going around there. A good point that Dean brought up when you're doing mark roundings, especially on this lake. It's not like on the open ocean, it's not like in the bays where you have constant breeze. Get your head out of the boat, okay? Don't be studying about, especially in the scows and the thistles, where you're putting your chutes up, everyone's ready to get around the mark, put your chute up and everything like that. That wind might shift 3 times by the time you get to that mark. So 200 yards before the mark, study the lake, see where it is, keep on your course, don't worry about your spinnaker, okay? ACATs are a little different, you've got to keep your momentum going, but with the boats with a chute, get to the mark, get around the mark, see where it is after the mark, and then get your chute up, okay? You'll pass boats left and right that way. Rob, can we go to westerly breeze? I'm most used to sailing on a westerly breeze, okay, or a northwest breeze.
By northwest?
Right, or north, that's good. Okay, where we start either from Nolan's Point and go over into Byron Bay, or we start down, what is this, 8?
That's it.
8, and go up to Byron Bay here. Okay, you can see if we start down here, you've got this huge shadow in here. And a lot of guys will start, and they'll come on starboard, and they'll come across here, and then they're just going to die. So I always tend to start and tack over immediately and come over to probably around Nolan's Point. You want to stay from Halsey Island, you want to stay away from the west shore over here. You get too close, you're just going to die. So I try to stay in the middle of the lake. As you're coming through here, which is called the slot, okay, if you have a direction coming right like this, okay, it usually lifts you up, straight up, so you get this area here. It absolutely lifts you up. You get a nice ride in here coming through, and these are the wind breezes coming through Byron Bay, and you can do a nice ride up to the lake, up to the mark. You'll also find that if you can hit Halsey Island and hit it right over here, sometimes you'll get a nice lift coming through here. The worst thing you could do is go straight down the middle though, okay? Because you'll see again, boats passing you right and left coming right through there. For some reason you get a strange lift coming up here, and if you come over here, boom, all of a sudden you get a lift coming across here. Going down straight in the middle always dies for me. I'm not that familiar because the courses are so short, so we really don't do a westerly as much over here. But you can see the pathways that you can go, okay? And basically they're straight pathways from the mark. Stay in the middle of the course. Don't go to the edges. Don't go to the ends of it. And the same thing if you had a mark from here to here, just stay in the middle because you could be blanketed from every other direction. Want to go to the next one, Rob?
Which way you want to
Doesn't matter. This is Dean's depiction of the always moving hole from hell. Okay? And it absolutely is, okay? If you're trying to go, and okay, this is an easterly direction, but anytime you're traveling up the lake and sailing in here, there is a hole that's always moving like this. Okay? So you want to be careful, whether it's from the east or whether it's from the west. This hole either moves from here, down to here, up and down. I don't know if you guys seen anything different, but it's a constant hole in the middle of the lake, and I just try to avoid it. So that's where I'll hug the shoreline coming through here. If I'm coming up this direction, I just stay away from that hole. Easterly courses are tough to sail on this lake because they're such short courses. Very, very difficult to maneuver. Again, you can see how much is shielded, even though the wind is a little more constant because you don't have the high hills like you have in the westerly breezes. Next one, Rob. Okay. We didn't do the southwest. Yeah, we did do southwest. Northwest breeze. Okay, northwest. Okay, Dean has depicted here, and again, I agree with him. These are where the breeze comes through in there. Tom alliterated that a little bit more. Big shadow, though, down the west shore here. So a lot of times when it's coming from the northwest, okay, you'll see the whole group coming over here and then coming up and just dying. Hug towards the shore over here. If you tack over, you get that lift right in the middle, in the slot right here, where you get the lift over by Halsey Island in here. I stay away directly from the middle. I go on either side of that. And the same thing around the mark. I don't go deep down into Byron Bay, okay, because you can get caught, you can get stuck. Dean always told the story, I guess, Tom, you can tell it better, Baker's Hole. Explain what that is.
It was called the Tom's Hole.
Tom's Hole. Gus Baker, Doc Baker, used to sail, and wherever you see these holes, he's sailing it, okay? And 1 out of 10 times, okay, he'd come up smelling like a rose, okay? But most of the time, 9 out of 10 times, he'd just tank. But if you're in last place, you got nothing to do, go into those holes, go into those Baker's Holes, as they call them, and see what you can do about it. So, that's about it.
I summarize something again. Always going to come back up and summarize for us, then I'll say goodbye.
A lot of different directions, a lot of people say the same thing. The thing you want to, there's nothing here that's magic. Dean's got the diagram's drawn pretty well. Wind channels around curves. You can plan ahead what's going to happen. If the wind's coming from the west, you don't want to get up onto the west shore. The wind is light there. You don't want to get up onto those shores. But you'll notice how he's got these curves, like Nolan's Point. Yes, Nolan's Point here. The wind, predominant direction is this way, but when it hits a point of land, it's going to follow the contour. So if you can gauge how you come into that point, you're going to get a lift coming in and a lift going out. As Tom said, if you're up by a few boat lengths, makes all the difference sometimes. You really got to be, there's a narrow target to hit, so you try to set yourself up for that. But it's not magic. You just, Dean's done it pretty well here. You can see how the wind channels around these points. And we do try to hit points as we come down the lake to get lifts coming in and coming out. Like I said, I had mentioned how to defend the fleet because little subtleties in the direction is going to determine which side of the group is going to win. But when we stand up here on the lawn in the morning, looking at what direction it is, you can look out there and you can see how it follows around the contour. You can get up on the upper deck and look at it. You can plan your route, sort of, in advance. So there's nothing magical about it. With enough experience, I mean, you'll see some things work more often than others. But if you look at these contours that Dean has drawn from various directions, that's pretty accurate. Figure out where you want to be. Obviously, there's other boats in your race which you have to take into account. Rarely can you do exactly what you want, but you try to capitalize on that versus your tactical decisions relative to the other boats. And I'll hand over to Scott.
Thanks, Lloyd. I'd just like to thank a couple of people, our audiovisual master, John Seitz, and I'd also like to thank Mark Skeels, who put this together. And we're going to be doing this a couple more times this summer, probably 3 or 4. And next time, the ACAT class is having a keg of beer, so I will encourage you to come to that. Thank you very much.
Goretzky.